Greetings. I see you have awoken. Now that that is the case, let us talk. You may not remember, but I have brought you here for a reason. You sought the knowledge of the Sith. You were rejected by a certain someone. However, there is many reasons for that. And since you try to find truth and enlightenment and knowledge on the dark side, I am somewhat inclined to help. But before we can go into any detail, we have to make sure that you understand a few things. You see, the very name Sith these days has been greatly misunderstood, tarnished, tainted, with the people that seem to think that they know what the Sith are, have no idea, and that includes the Jedi as well as, you and so many others. Before we go into any detail, however, I want to make sure that you are understanding what you're getting yourself into. And for this, I want to clarify a few things that you most likely have little to no knowledge of. The very first thing that you need to understand is what the Sith actually are, because these days they have become a joke of themselves, if even that, more akin to fallen Jedi than anything relating to the Sith. For that you need to understand something about Sith history, and the history, as it says, repeats itself because the people in it are the same people. Now obviously not the exact same people, but the same humans, the same species. History tends to repeat itself because people with the same ambitions, the same ideas, the same fears, the same wants, the same needs, try the exact same things to achieve the exact same outcomes time and time again, and that's why things keep repeating. If you want to succeed where they failed, you have to take a different approach. You have to understand first, and then you have to act. If you don't understand, there's no way you can win and achieve victory. And for that understanding, you have to start on the very beginning. When we talk about the Sith, we could mean different things, because there was once a species, a race called the Sith, red-skinned tentacled beings, great warriors, feared, strong in the dark side, yet no match for those who came to the planet, their home world of Korriban, and conquered them, mixed with them, mingled with them, and created something else, the Sith Order, that we actually mean when we speak about the Sith usually. It was a combination of the teachings of powerful dark side users from the ancient Jedi Order that then were exiled and became the leaders of the Sith race and species, and used their philosophies, their knowledge of the dark side, and mixed it with the culture, the religion, and the philosophies of the people of the dark side, creating half-breeds and ultimately empires built on them. Now, for you to understand what you're getting yourself into, you have to understand the origins of the Sith and what they actually are. In ancient times, more than 10,000 years ago, there was one order called the Jedi, not Jedi, not Sith, but both, placed on the moon, on the planet of Tython, which was orbited by two moons, Ashla and Bogan, creating harmony. You see, Ashla was a moon deeply connected, radiating with the light side, and Bogan was a moon deeply baked into the dark side. And the planet was mixed in a constant exchange between light and dark side from those moons, creating a harmony. And whenever this harmony was disturbed, it created powerful force storms that threatened all life on the planet, no matter if the light or the dark side became stronger. Now, on this very planet, the Jedi Order started to exist. It is an order mixed with that used both the light and the dark side, and people that got too much drawn into the light were exiled to Bogan, to the moon, in order to bathe in the dark side energies to make sure that they regained a balance before they were permitted back onto the planet. And people who were too strong in the dark side were exiled to Ashla to feel the light side and be completely washed from their darkness until they regained balance and were allowed back. Now, it was in this ancient Jedi Order that some Darksiders questioned how to achieve more power, how to understand the dark side better, how to understand the Force better. And it was the Lightsiders that said this is too dangerous and wanted to censor them and keep them down. The problem is that censoring knowledge doesn't go well usually, and instead of aiding them and guiding them, helping them and making sure that the knowledge found wouldn't be a threat, they exiled them, but not to the moons, but to a dark side planet that they were certain they would die on, because the Jedi, the light side Jedi, didn't want to outright kill or murder the dissidents, because that wouldn't be a light side thing to do. No, exiling them to a desert planet where they would certainly die was apparently good in their opinion, because, well, they didn't kill them, the planet did. Whoopsie. But as things are, the people survived on this desert planet, and this desert planet was called Korriban. And on Korriban there already was a species living, named Sith, and those Jedi, the dark side Jedi, killed their king and conquered the people and created in harmony a mix of the dark side knowledge of the Jedi and the dark side knowledge of the Sith. They started worshipping the Sith gods and many other things. And it is from this union that the Sith Order was born. And what you have to understand is that the Sith are first of all a religion, a philosophy, and ultimately a way of life. That's what the Sith truly are. We pray to the so-called ancient gods of the Sith, like Nakash, the ultimate personification, no, the creator of the very dark side itself. That's the god of the pantheon, but there are many more that we may get into at a later time. Now it is important that you understand that the Sith are a religion for first and foremost, from which is birthed a philosophy that we follow. Now, in the glory days of the Sith Empire, we had this basic principle fleshed out. There was, or used to be, many different Sith and Sith ways. Back in the ancient days, there were only 3 castes. There were the slaves, the Grobu, there were the Masasi, the warriors, and the Kisai, the priests, all achieving ranks in this order, and above them was one king to rule. Now, as the empire grew beyond one planet, as it became more complex, so did the whole system. At the very bottom were the Sith. The usual Sith, the so-called Sith acolytes, were people that just followed the religion and the philosophy. They didn't have to be force sensitive, they didn't have to be powerful, they didn't need to strive for dominance over anything or anyone, or mastering the Force, because how could they? They didn't even know or feel the Force. So obviously the Sith acolytes were the weakest, they were the groundwork, the foundation, but they were not slaves, because the very Sith philosophy doesn't permit Sith to be slaves. If you have slaves, you can, but slaves who are willing to serve are definitely not Sith material. Now, if that's said, beyond the acolytes were the initiates. The initiates of the Sith were usually the Force-sensitive Sith, those taught the ways of the Sith, the philosophies, the religions, the rituals that were exposed to the Sith language and writing system. They were the ones learning how to be a Sith, similar to you now. The main difference here is that the Jedi Order takes in little children against their consent, even against their parents' consent in many times, and they brainwash them and mold them and shape them and educate them and make all they know the Jedi Order, all they know the Jedi teachings. They teach them to suppress who they truly are into conformity. The Sith are basically the opposite of that. Just like with the light and the dark side, the Jedi who became very strong on the light side, the Sith became very strong on the dark side and opposed the Jedi with a passion that sometimes got a bit out of hand. As example, one reason why so many Sith use red lightsabers is to mock and spite the Jedi who mostly use blue lightsabers. It was not a choice of effectiveness, it was a choice of vengeance, of anger, which, by the way, is not the way you should do things, but that's how it happened. Similarly, the structure of the Sith was kind of similar to the Jedi structure. Now, if you want to compare, you can say that the Sith acolytes are basically non-Jedi that still serve the Jedi as retainers or archivists or something like that. The Sith initiates are similar to Padawans in many ways. The acolytes usually get taught by one teacher, though they are in classes, not a one-by-one teaching. The main difference being that the Sith acolytes have to already have gone through a good part of life, at least finished puberty, to make sure that they know who they are, that they know how to question things, that they don't blindly accept anything, that they are basically willing to become Sith, that they consent. Not only that, in order to be a Sith acolyte proper, you have to pass many trials. Trials that can be lethal if you fail. Trials of combat, trials of wits, trials with traps, trials of labyrinths, trial of dangerous missions. You have to earn your right to be an acolyte. And you have to definitely earn your place as an initiate, which you can never be without proving your worth first. Now, once you have completed your initiation into the Sith Order, you will usually join one of many branches, similar to what the Jedi have. The Jedi have the Jedi Guardians who fight, they have the Jedi Counselors who advise, they have the Sentinels who spy, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, the Sith have a similar structure, one of which is the Sith warriors. The Sith warriors learn how to endure in battle. They know how to fight. They know several forms of lightsaber combat in and out. They wear heavy armor because the armor works. They use more or less defensive techniques of the Force. They learn how to create Force shields, how to drain the life of their enemies to heal themselves. They learn how to do the telekinesis, how to force push, force pull, lightsaber throw. They learn how to force choke, and the better of them, how to force crush. They learn many abilities in the Force that allow them to become stronger and stronger still, like Force speed and Force jump, and many of them learn forms of Force endurance or Force shields and Force barriers. The warriors are the more defensive Sith. They learn how to endure in battle. Then there is the Sith Marauders. Those are the warriors, or more said, the marauders that learn to unleash their vengeance and their rage and their hatred onto their enemies and cause as much havoc and destruction as they possibly can. They usually fight with lightsabers as well, though they use more offensive powers of the Force. Some of them learn how to do Force waves to affect many enemies at once, how to use Force panic to make them flee, how to use Force rage to ignore wounds and enhance their strength. They know how to really rampage into the enemy's lines, and the Sith Marauders are definitely a sight to behold. Very dangerous, very effective. Then you have those Sith that specialize less in physical combat and physical training or lightsaber combat, but focus more on the mind, focus more on Force powers. One of these are the Sith Inquisitors, that usually are the heavy artillery with Force powers, if you will. They are the ones who use Force lightning, Force storms, Force plague to weaken entire groups of enemies and make them suffer in agony and sickness. They are the ones that drop the big guns like pyrokinesis, where they throw literal fireballs at their enemies to burn them alive, or cryokinesis and freeze them until there's nothing but frozen corpses on the battlefield. The Sith Inquisitors are masters of the Force and specialize in it. Then you have the Sith... sometimes this dry air gets to me. Then you have the Sith Assassins. The Sith Assassins are the ones that specialize in being sneaky, being unseen, becoming one with the darkness around them. Silent killers that advance through enemy lines to get to the commanders. They specialize in one-on-one combat. They win duels. They are the ones that take out strategical targets with precision, may they be alive or machinery. They usually use a lightsaber staff. They usually learn how to do Force lightning and affect single targets. They are very, very deadly. If you encounter one, good luck, because that's all that's gonna help you. Now, they are not undefeatable, but they are very, very properly trained, very, very powerful and strong. So you may need to pay attention to what you are doing when you face them, though their biggest strength is the element of surprise, because they will attack you when you are at your weakest. There's also Sith Inquisitors, who specialize in interrogation and torture, and they are there to gather information and spread fear in the enemy ranks. That's what they are good, that's their purpose. Above them are the Sith Knights. The Sith Knights are those Sith that have proven themselves times and times again and are basically the commanders on the field. They command troops, they give orders, they are the officers of the Sith Order, if you will. They are the ones proven in combat and very, very deadly to behold, though they also have to have a strategic mind, mastering the Force and in combat, similar to what the Jedi have with their Jedi Knights. Now above that is something called the Sith Master. Now Sith Masters are again similar to Jedi Masters, where they have proven their connection to the dark side and the mastery of the Sith teachings. They have advanced far in the Order and are usually in command of outposts, of academies, of similar centers of attention, important buildings, important infrastructure, important command, like entire military posts. The Sith Masters are very powerful in the dark side and have a deep connection and understanding of it. Above that, we do have the so-called Sith Lords. The Jedi used to have something like that in the Jedi Lords, and they had a similar purpose. You see, the Sith Lords have governed at least a planet, more likely an entire star system. Sith Lords held actual political power and had resources. This is the first rank within the Order that is always tied to mundane, worldly affairs. That is not just a title, that is having actual power. That's a Sith Lord. Now, there is something else too, and that's the Sith Council. Now, again, similar to the Jedi Council, the Sith Council consists of the highest ranking Sith, the masters of the masters that have persisted for long, that have achieved much, proven themselves. And in the Sith Council, they would have a certain position. There was a seat for military offense, a seat for military defense, one for technological research, one for force research and ancient knowledge and artifacts. There was one seat for biology, there was a seat for politics. The Sith Council would advise and rule the entire Sith Order in a day-to-day basis. And above that was the Emperor. The Emperor was usually the person in charge, the ultimate defender of the Sith, the ultimate representation of what the Sith strive to be, and the one who had the ultimate power, even though that was barely directly used. Now you may ask yourself a question, one that I have heard other acolytes ask. What about a Darth? Oh, dear summer child, the Darth is not a title of any power or position. It's not a rank within the Order. It's an honorary title, and it stems from even more ancient times than the Jedi Order. You see, the ancient Rakatan Empire, the probably strongest Darksiders in all of the galaxy's history, the ones that built the Star Forge, the ones who fought the builders of the hyperlanes that we still use, the Qua, the ones who won against the Qua and diminished them in great numbers. The Rakata had a word, and I have heard many origins of the word Darth. Some speculated that it was a mixture of the word dark and the word death, Darth. That's the idea that some have sprouted, though the origin is not in the common language. It's a nice touch, but not true. Some said it's Dark Lord of the Sith, Dark Lord of the Sith, so Darth. That's also a nice idea, creative, but simply not true. It has nothing to do with the common language. In ancient Rakatan, there was two words, Dar and Tha. Dar Tha meant victory, death. So one who has gained victory over death, one who conquered and defeated death. And there was the Emperor of the Rakatan Empire, who had the title Daritha. Now, in the Sith language, some of this remained, and the Sith Order took it on and made it into the title Darth, which actually means those who conquer death. Now, that does mean that the title Darth was only given to those Sith that achieved one form of immortality. There were Darths like Darth Vandedu who managed to zombify their own body. Technically speaking, the body was dead, but they still inhabited that body and made it walk and do what it does through the dark side, powering it with dark side energies, making them effectively immortal, earning the title Darth. One more common way to do it was essence transfer, where you take your very soul, your very essence, the very being of who you are, and put it into a different body, changing bodies as time progresses, and whenever a body dies, you take on another, achieving technical immortality. There were people that became willing force ghosts and stayed around in a spiritual, not really corporal, but still persistent form, and those ghosts achieved immortality, earning them the title Darth. There were also a few other methods to get to this point. I, for myself, learned to refine certain techniques like force hibernation, force freeze, and similar techniques with the great help of cryokinesis to stop my cells from aging, which means that I certainly do not age anymore and thus have a way to immortality. Darth Sion took an interesting route of doing that by, well, basically refusing to die and surviving with sheer willpower alone, which is quite the feat, though also quite stubborn. You had people like Darth Nihilus, who just ate the life force of others to sustain himself and extend his own lifespan, or people like Darth Vitiate, who did great rituals with many sacrifices, absorbing the life force into himself. Now, those arts are lost in these days apparently, because Sith sorcery and Sith alchemy are almost unbeknownst to anyone these days, even though this was the great power of the Sith that put us leagues above the Jedi. You see, the Jedi can use the Force too. They cannot use the alchemy, and they do not use the sorcery. And that's, sadly, one of our greatest losses. And then there is the so-called Dark Lord of the Sith, which technically speaking is always the highest ranking Sith of the Sith Order, usually also the Emperor, though technically speaking doesn't have to, because in, say, Revan's rule of two, the actual rule of two, one was the Emperor, visible to all, and the other was the Shadow Hand, the actual Dark Lord of the Sith in the background, ruling from behind the scenes. And then we have one more thing to talk about, the so-called Sithari. Now, in ancient Sith language, that simply means Lord of the Sith. That's it. That's the direct translation. It's not a Sith Lord though, because in Sith mythology, the Sithari is the chosen one of the Sith, the chosen of the dark side. Many have claimed the title, from Marco Ragnos to Exar Kun to Valkorion, and even Revan at one point did. None of them were right, and definitely not Darth Bane. There is a certain prophecy that the Sithari will destroy and rebuild the Sith. Now, some of them certainly did great damage to the Sith, but no one really managed to rebuild them properly, which is why many believe that the Sithari hasn't existed yet and will come one day. Maybe you will be, who knows, we will see. Now, with that said, I want to finish my lesson on the Sith Order for now and leave you to whatever you're doing, though I recommend you study more until we meet again. May the Force be with you.